Hey Castle fans, this one is going to be a little different. During my vacation I visited a couple of interesting Lego related places, including the Lego factory in Germany and the Pick-a-Brick wall in Vienna. Since I'm currently building a rather large Lego castle, I thought I'd use the opportunity to find out something I wanted to know about for a while now. Does it actually make sense to visit the Lego factory in Germany if you're looking for parts for your Lego castle? I'll go through some of the parts that I think are really useful for building castles. Of course, none of these parts are exclusive to the factory, and you can find many of them through Lego stores Pick-a-Brick walls, BrickLink and elsewhere online. So rather than just showing you what I bought, I'll try to answer a slightly more useful question. Are these parts actually worth buying at the factory? And since I also visited the Pick-a-Brick wall in Vienna, I'll show you what I found there as well and compare the prices. I won't go too much into the Pick-a-Brick wall itself though. Every store has a different inventory and the selection also changes over time. And sadly, I don't live close enough to a store to buy from the Pick-a-Brick wall regularly, so I can't even tell you how often the inventory changes. If you happen to know, let me know in the comments. I recently heard it's about every 2 weeks. But the lack of Pick-a-Brick walls in my area also means I rely quite heavily on BrickLink. So, today we'll compare prices from the Lego factory, BrickLink and Pick-a-Brick walls. And I'll also add the current prices from the official Lego Pick-a-Brick online shop. Now I had to figure out how to actually group all the parts I bought and the ones I think are useful for castle building. And this is definitely not meant to be a complete list. I'm only looking at parts that were actually available when I visited. I mean, we probably don't want to do the math on how many different parts Lego makes in how many different colors. So I keep it simple and group them by topic. Let's start with something very general. We need gray walls. And for me, the MVP of gray walls is the humble 1x2 light bluish gray brick. In my tutorial video, you can see me building an example wall. Of course, you need the whole crew, from 1x1 all the way up to 1x16. Although, from 4 studs onwards, only the even lengths are available, and at least for me, they become less relevant. And then we also have all the modified bricks. Here I heavily rely on the 1x2 and 1x4 masonry bricks and the brick modified with studs on the side, where the variation is a bit larger. At the factory there's a big variety of both 1x2 bricks and masonry bricks, so it's time to do some math and figure out what they actually cost per brick. The Lego factory is pretty easy. We get 100 grams for 11 euros, with a few expectations for larger parts and animals. The 1x2 masonry brick weighs about 0.77 grams, which means we can fit roughly 129 of them into 100 grams. That's about 8.5 cents per brick. The regular 1x2 brick is a little heavier at 0.83 grams, so we get exactly 120 bricks per 100 grams. That's 9 fewer bricks, resulting in about 9.2 cents per brick. On BrickLink you can easily find them for around 10 cents each, sometimes even 8 cents or less if you're lucky. It's still better than the 11 cents you'd pay on the Lego Pick-a-Brick online shop. The masonry brick is actually cheaper on BrickLink as well. You can usually get them for less than 9 cents each, while on the Pick-a-Brick online shop they are actually more expensive with 13 cents per brick. So out of all the options, the online Pick-a-Brick shop is probably the worst deal for these. Now imagine you find some of these 1x2 bricks in the wild on one of the Pick-a-Brick walls in a Lego store. Here you have the option to fill a big box for 20 euro. I calculated that you can fit 720 of these into one box, and I filled a box with these bricks for cross-checking. I stacked them up in groups of 9 and managed to fit 80 stacks into the box. That's 720 bricks in total. And it took me only about half an hour to fill an empty box. Could be worse. You can even squeeze in 5 more bricks. And there's also enough room on top for 80 additional 1x2 tiles. That's an insane 2.8 cents per brick, without even considering the tiles. And here, it doesn't even matter whether you're using the masonry version or the regular brick. So in the end, if you have the chance to find these on a Pick-a-Brick wall in a Lego store, that's probably by far the best way to get them. With 9.2 cents for the regular brick, the factory is moderate, but I would prefer to buy them a little bit cheaper on BrickLink. If you're here anyway, I think it's still worth getting some. At least that's what I did. And I was lucky enough that there was currently a 20% discount on everything, which puts these bricks into a really good price range. I bought a few masonry bricks in different colors: dark tan, dark red, nougat, medium nougat and more. Plan to use them for different houses in the market district. Okay, now we'll go much faster through some more parts. I love ingot pieces. Sadly, the one I really need, mostly for castle walls, in light bluish grey wasn't available. But there was a big variety of tiles available at the factory. These are really useful for things like cobblestone paths, indoor floors and roofs. For roofs, I currently really like dark red, red and dark blue. At the factory, an ingot piece comes in at around 2.5 cents. A regular 1x2 tile is a little heavier and comes in at around 2.9 cents. A 1x3 tile comes in at around 4.4 cents and a 1x4 tile at around 6 cents. The 2x2 tile is also really good priced at around 5.4 cents. And also mentionable and available were light and dark bluish grey triangular 2x2 tiles at 2.7 cents. I used these tiles a lot for wall battlements or floors. For light and dark bluish grey, all these parts are actually more expensive on BrickLink and the Pick-a-Brick online shop. I will add an Excel sheet in the description where you have the full overview. But what if you find tiles on a Pick-a-Brick wall? You can theoretically fit over 2000 1x2 tiles into one Pick-a-Brick box, which would put them at well under 1 cent each. So for tiles and plates as well, the Pick-a-Brick wall will always be the winner. Only the small amount of different parts is the limiting factor. I had the chance to get these 1x1 quarter tiles in Vienna, in red for the roofers and in dark tan for ground. Overall, the factory actually has some really decent prices, especially for smaller tiles. What I really missed at the factory were 1x1 and 2x2 round tiles in any shade of grey. These are always in high demand for me because I use them for cobblestone paths and indoors for things like wall corridors, but none of them were available. The only one I found was the 1x2 round tile, which is at least one really useful piece at a really good price. Next, let's look at some more nature related stuff. For mountains, I generally go with dark bluish grey, so I especially need slopes, inverted slopes and some of the bigger bricks. Unfortunately, I think the factory really lacks slopes. There was a bigger variety of red slopes, probably because they are often used as roofs. But in dark bluish grey, there was nothing really interesting apart from the 1x2 inverted slope. Otherwise, it was mostly shapes I don't really use that often. But in the end, I was able to snag a small selection of different dark bluish grey parts that are useful for mountains. Especially these corner plates and bricks, which I use very often. And I also got a really decent number of 2x4 bricks in dark bluish grey. But I didn't buy these at the factory. These bigger bricks are really expensive at the factory, even more expensive than on the Pick-a-Brick online store. Instead, I got them from the Pick-a-Brick wall in Vienna, where they cost a little more than half the factory price. We'll also cover another very obvious type of part that I really missed at the factory. Small 1-stud thick plates, 1x2, 1x3, 1x4 and so on. The only ones I found were 1x2 white plates, 1x6 plates in dark bluish grey and reddish brown, as well as the corner plates in light and dark bluish grey that I already covered before. I really expected more plates. And bigger plates? Well, big plates are very heavy, which makes them pretty expensive at the factory. I probably shouldn't have bought these at the factory, considering you can get them for less than half the price on BrickLink if you find a good deal. And I really should have made this video before going to the factory. But hey, now at least you can profit from my experience. Nature also always means vegetation. And Lego has made so many plant parts nowadays. And I can't believe I forgot to film these. When I was a kid, it was basically just a handful of different plant parts in one simple shade of green. And not all of them were even that useful. Today, there's a whole flute of different plant parts in all kinds of green tones. But I already have a pretty big stock of various plant pieces, so I didn't buy too many of them at the factory. The ones I did buy were dark red, bright light orange and this light yellow, as well as some parts I use all the time for the ivy vines on my walls, even though they're apparently not everyone's favorite. Additionally, I picked up some newer parts that I didn't have many of yet. The layered leaf element, this bigger 1x2 fern leaf, and these Super Mario leaves, as well as some mounting parts in green. Apart from these bigger 1x2 plant pieces, which are heavier, the plant parts all had pretty reasonable prices. With a 20% discount, this was actually not a bad buy. But you can also safely rely on BrickLink for these parts. I also seem to have hit the jackpot at the Pick-a-Brick wall in Vienna. I got both green and dark green fern parts there. I've been asked why I didn't just buy boxes full of these already. Maybe I should have. Additionally, I have these red flowers and some colors I may not find a use for. If you want to see the full overview of the parts prices, you can check the Excel sheet. But as mentioned, plant pieces are priced good if they're smaller. I mean, it gets quite obvious. Is your part small and light? It's probably at a good price. Is it heavy? Well, don't buy it at the factory. And now, I'll add some more honorable mentions. And probably the best deal at the factory. I bought some of these Minecraft ladders, some barrels, I had to, and this colorful pile of transparent parts for the alchemist at some point. I also picked up some trans blue parts for water. There will be a shore eventually. I bought some cheese slopes as well. One of my first episodes was about a secret cheese room, so I definitely need to upgrade it with these slopes. And finally, The best part you can buy at the factory, in my opinion, is the horse. Horses are only $4.50 at the factory. With a 20% discount, I only paid €3.60 per horse, and they had the new white horse, medium nougat and reddish brown ones. On the Lego online shop they go for $5.90 when they are even in stock. On BrickLink they are getting cheaper. Over the past year they were about €6, now you can find them around 5. So if you're at Legoland anyway, I'd say definitely grab some horses. I learned from making this video, you can get some really decent parts at the factory. The variety is great, although for castle parts it could definitely be better. And there's one big thing to keep in mind, be careful with heavy parts. Because once the parts get heavy, the factory price gets really bad quickly. That's it from my overview of buying castle parts at the Lego factory. Wait, one more thing that might be important. You won't get any Lego Insiders points at the factory, because the Legoland isn't operated by the Lego Group, but by Merlin Entertainments. Okay, that was actually a lot more work and research than I expected, and I have not even showed you all the parts that I bought. I hope you enjoyed this video anyway and hopefully learned something along the way. Let me know about your own experience with the Lego factory and check out my Castle MOC world. For now I'm going back to build my castle, brick by brick. See you over there soon.